The night Eliza Whitmore destroyed her own life to save a stranger's, she wore a dress no one would remember and stood in a corner no one bothered to look at. She had exactly 60 seconds to decide. Let a good man walk into a trap or speak a truth that would mark her as an enemy to the most powerful woman in London. Her hands shook, her throat closed. Every instinct screamed, "Stay silent." But when she opened her mouth, the words that came out would shatter an engagement, ignite a war, and prove that the most dangerous woman in any room is the one nobody sees coming. If you want to see how an invisible woman becomes unforgettable, stay until the end and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. Now, let's begin. The Ashford Ballroom glittered like a jewel box someone had shaken too hard. Chandeliers dripped crystal tears over marble floors so polished they reflected the swirling gowns of London's finest families. Musicians played somewhere behind a wall of roses the size of carriage wheels. Champagne flowed, laughter sparkled, and Eliza Whitmore stood exactly where she always stood, at the edge of everything, watching. She had perfected the art of near invisibility over 23 years of minor nobility. Her dress was expensive enough not to embarrass her father, plain enough not to draw attention. Pale blue silk that made her look like part of the wallpaper, her dark hair pinned simply. No jewels worth mentioning. She had learned early that girls like her, neither rich enough to matter nor poor enough to pity, survived by being pleasant, quiet, and utterly forgettable. Eliza, darling, do stand up straight. Her mother swept past in peacock feathers and disappointment, not bothering to stop. And smile, for heaven's sake. You look like you're at a funeral. Yes, Mama. The smile came automatically. So did the straight spine. So did the practiced expression of polite interest as she scanned the crowd, looking for someone who might tolerate 5 minutes of conversation about the weather or the musicians or literally anything that would make her look less pathetic standing alone. But everyone worth talking to was already clustered around the only two people who mattered tonight. Lady Serena Caldwell held court near the terrace doors, surrounded by admirers like planets circling the sun. She was the kind of beautiful that made other women check mirrors and find themselves lacking. Golden hair that caught the light like spun sugar, a laugh that sounded like music, a dress the color of champagne that probably cost more than Eliza's father earned in a year. Men stumbled over themselves to bring her refreshments. Women studied her like a puzzle they desperately wanted to solve. And beside her, patient as carved stone, stood the Duke of Blackthorn. Adrian Blackthorn was not handsome in the conventional sense. His face was too hard for that, all sharp angles and watchful eyes. But he carried himself like a man who had never questioned his right to any room he entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, expensively dressed in black that made him look like he'd arrived at the ball directly from passing judgment on someone's immortal soul. He spoke rarely, smiled less. And when he looked at his fiancée, his expression remained utterly, perfectly unreadable. They had announced their engagement 6 weeks ago. London society had collectively sighed with satisfaction. The arrangement made flawless sense, his title and influence, her beauty and connections. Everyone agreed it was a perfect match. Everyone except Eliza, who had spent too many years watching people to miss the small, terrible details no one else noticed. The way Serena's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at the Duke. The way her fingers drummed restlessly against her champagne glass whenever he spoke. The way she would glance toward the terrace doors when she thought no one was looking, as if calculating distances, measuring escapes. And most damning of all, the way her entire face transformed when Lord Edmund Hartley entered her line of sight. Eliza had first noticed it 3 weeks ago at the Pemberton dinner party. A fleeting moment of unguarded hunger that vanished so quickly she'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. But she'd seen it again at the theater, and again at Lady Worthington's garden party. Always the same pattern. Serena would be laughing, glittering, playing the perfect fiancée, and then Hartley would appear, and something raw and desperate would flash across her face before the mask snapped back into place. No one else saw it. No one else was looking. But Eliza had spent her entire life being invisible, which meant she'd also spent her entire life watching the people who weren't. Miss Whitmore! She nearly jumped out of her skin. Lord Pemberton materialized beside her, red-faced and swaying slightly. Drunk then. Wonderful. My lord, she curtsied automatically, already scanning for an escape route. Terrible crush tonight, eh? He leaned too close, breathing whiskey fumes. You look lonely. Perhaps you'd like some company? Actually, I was just, pretty girl like you shouldn't be standing alone. His hand landed on her elbow, proprietary and damp. Let me get you some champagne. We could take a turn on the terrace, get some air. Lord Pemberton. Her mother appeared like an avenging angel in purple silk. How delightful. I've been meaning to introduce you to my niece, just arrived from Bath. Such a charming girl. Do come meet her. She extracted Eliza with practiced efficiency, steering them both toward a cluster of matrons who would serve as excellent chaperones and terrible company. Really, Eliza? Her mother's voice dropped to a furious whisper. I leave you alone for 10 minutes and you're letting Pemberton maul you in public. The man's a known rake. Do you want people to think you're desperate? I wasn't letting him. Stand with your cousins. And for heaven's sake, try to look pleasant. Your father's business partner is here tonight, and if you could manage to make even a slightly favorable impression. She continued talking, but Eliza stopped listening. Because across the ballroom, she'd just watched Serena Caldwell lean close to her fiancé, whisper something in his ear, and slip away toward the terrace. Alone. The Duke watched her go with the same impassive expression he wore for everything. Then he turned back to his conversation with Lord Ashford, apparently unconcerned that his fiancée had just disappeared into the gardens after midnight. Eliza's stomach knotted. It's nothing, she told herself. Women step outside for air all the time. It doesn't mean... But then she saw Lord Edmund Hartley set down his drink and drift casually toward the same terrace doors. Her heart started hammering. Are you even listening to me? Her mother's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. Honestly, Eliza, sometimes I think you're not even trying to... Excuse me, Mama. I'm not feeling well. She didn't wait for permission. She just moved, weaving through the crowd with the same invisibility that usually felt like a curse, but tonight felt like a gift. No one stopped her. No one even looked at her. She was just another plain girl in a plain dress, crossing a ballroom, going nowhere important. The terrace doors stood open to the summer night. Music and laughter spilled out into darkness, thick with the scent of roses. The Ashford Gardens were famous, acres of carefully manicured pathways, fountains, and strategically placed benches designed for romantic assignations, or secret betrayals. Eliza stepped outside and immediately regretted it. The darkness pressed close, broken only by scattered lanterns that created more shadows than light. She could hear voices in the distance, laughter from other couples taking advantage of the privacy, but she couldn't see anything beyond the immediate terrace. This is insane, she thought. You're following people into dark gardens based on what? A feeling? Some looks you probably imagined? But her feet kept moving anyway, down the terrace steps and into the maze of hedges and flower beds. She stayed on the gravel paths where her footsteps would make the least noise, straining to hear anything over the pounding of her own heart. Then, from somewhere deeper in the gardens, she heard Serena's laugh, low and intimate, nothing like the bright performative sound she made in the ballroom. Eliza froze. She should turn back. This was none of her business. If Serena Caldwell wanted to destroy her own engagement, that was her choice. Getting involved would be, I've missed you. Serena's voice drifted through the roses, soft and aching. These past weeks have been torture, smiling at him, letting him touch me, pretending I don't wish every moment that it was you. Shh, a man's voice. Hartley. Someone might hear. Let them. There was rustling, movement. I'm so tired of pretending, Edmund, so tired of this charade. 6 more weeks, Hartley's voice gentled. The wedding, the honeymoon, and then we'll have everything we need. His money, his title, and all the freedom in the world to be together. You just have to be patient a little longer. Eliza's breath stopped. I know. Serena sounded like she was crying. I know, but I hate every second I'm with him. He's so cold, Edmund, so calculating. Sometimes I think he suspects. He doesn't. Men like Blackthorne don't believe their perfect arrangements can go wrong. He thinks he's bought himself a decorative duchess who will produce decorative heirs and never cause him a moment's trouble. And when the marriage is done, when we have access to his accounts, his properties, then you'll be a very wealthy duchess with a conveniently absent husband and all the time in the world for your devoted cousin who just happens to visit very, very often. They both laughed. The sound made Eliza feel sick. "Promise me." Serena's voice turned fierce. "Promise me that once this is done, we'll never have to hide again." "I promise." There were sounds of kissing, soft murmurs. "Now go back before someone notices. I'll follow in 10 minutes." "I love you, Edmund." "I love you too. Now go." Footsteps on gravel, coming closer. Eliza panicked. She looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the hedges were too thick and the paths too open. Any second now, Serena would round the corner and find her standing here like an eavesdropping fool, and then she did the only thing she could think of. She turned and ran. Not back toward the ballroom. That would mean meeting Serena head on. Instead, she dove deeper into the gardens, taking random turns, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She didn't stop until she was thoroughly lost, standing in a small clearing centered on a fountain of some Greek goddess pouring water from an urn. Her hands were shaking. Her mind was racing. She'd just overheard the social crime of the century. Serena Caldwell, the diamond of London society, was planning to marry the Duke of Blackthorn for his money while continuing an affair with Lord Hartley. She would walk down the aisle in 6 weeks and lie through her vows. She would take the Duke's name, his fortune, his trust, and give him nothing but deception in return. And no one knew except Eliza. The weight of it crushed down on her shoulders. She sank onto the edge of the fountain, pressing her palms against cold stone, trying to think. What was she supposed to do with this information? Telling anyone would be social suicide. She had no proof beyond her word, and who would believe her? The overlooked daughter of a minor nobleman accusing London's most celebrated beauty of adultery. They'd call her jealous, vindictive, a liar trying to ruin a better woman's happiness. Her family would be destroyed by association. Her father's business connections would evaporate. Her mother would never forgive her, but staying silent meant letting a good man, and everyone said the Duke was honorable, if cold, walk blindly into a trap that would humiliate him, bankrupt him, and make him the laughingstock of London society. Eliza didn't know the Duke of Blackthorn. She'd never even spoken to him, but she'd watched him tonight, standing beside his fiancée with that carefully neutral expression, and she'd seen something everyone else missed. Loneliness. He was alone in a crowded room the same way she was, playing a part, following rules, doing what was expected. And in 6 weeks, his reward for all that duty would be a wife who despised him and a lover stealing his fortune. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Eliza pressed her hands against her face and tried to think rationally. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe she'd misunderstood. Maybe Serena and Hartley were just friends, and that conversation was innocent, and she was creating a scandal out of nothing. But she knew what she'd heard. She knew what she'd seen. And she knew that walking away meant becoming complicit in a cruelty she couldn't stomach. "Stupid," she whispered to herself. "Stupid, stupid, stupid." But even as she said it, she was standing up, smoothing her dress, trying to steady her breathing. She had to tell him. She had to warn him, even if it destroyed her. The walk back to the ballroom felt like marching toward her own execution. Every step closer to the lights and music was a step closer to the moment that would either save a stranger or ruin her life. Probably both. By the time she reached the terrace, her hands had stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over her, the kind that came from knowing you were about to do something terrible and necessary, and there was no going back. She paused at the terrace doors, scanning the crowd for the Duke. He was still exactly where she'd left him, talking with Lord Ashford near the refreshment tables. Serena had returned and was holding court again, looking flushed and radiant. No one suspected a thing. Eliza took a deep breath. Then she walked directly toward the Duke of Blackthorn. The crowd parted around her without even noticing. She was too insignificant to block, too forgettable to acknowledge. She used that now, slipping through conversations and clusters of aristocrats like a ghost, 20 feet away. 10. 5. The Duke glanced up, and for just a second his eyes met hers. Dark eyes, watchful. They passed over her without recognition and started to turn away. "Your Grace," her voice came out steady, quiet, but it cut through the conversation like a knife. "I need to speak with you, privately. It's urgent." Lord Ashford blinked at her, surprised that furniture had learned to talk, but the Duke's expression shifted into something sharp and assessing. "I don't believe we've been introduced, Miss Whitmore. Eliza Whitmore." She curtsied automatically, her mother's training kicking in even now. "And no, we haven't, but I have information you need to hear, please." Something in her tone must have convinced him. He studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling feeling of being thoroughly catalogued and assessed. Then he nodded once. "Ashford, if you'll excuse me." He didn't touch her, didn't offer his arm, just gestured for her to precede him away from the crowd, toward an alcove partially hidden by a marble column and a decorative screen. Private enough for conversation, public enough to avoid scandal. When they were alone, or as alone as anyone could be in a crowded ballroom, he turned to her with an expression of polite, distant patience. "Well, Miss Whitmore, what's so urgent it requires interrupting a conversation with one of my oldest friends?" Up close, he was even more intimidating than she'd expected. Taller, broader. There was a coldness in him that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with a man who'd learned never to show vulnerability. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I apologize for the intrusion, Your Grace, but I've just overheard something in the gardens that concerns your engagement." His expression didn't change. "Have you?" It wasn't a question, more like a statement of skepticism wrapped in aristocratic courtesy. "Yes," but her voice wanted to shake. She wouldn't let it. Lady Serena met Lord Hartley in the Rose Gardens approximately 15 minutes ago. They're lovers. They plan to continue the affair after your marriage. She intends to marry you for access to your fortune while maintaining the relationship with him. There. She'd said it. The words hung in the air between them like an accusation. The Duke's face remained perfectly, terrifyingly blank. "That's quite an allegation, Miss Whitmore." "I know how it sounds. Do you?" His voice dropped, cold as winter. "Because it sounds like you've just accused the most celebrated woman in London of adultery based on what, exactly? What proof do you have?" "I heard them." She refused to back down. "I was in the gardens. I heard every word. They were intimate, planning. They talked about waiting 6 weeks until after the wedding, about how you wouldn't suspect, about accessing your accounts and properties." "Stop." The word cracked like a whip. "Do you have any idea what you're suggesting? The social consequences if you're wrong, or worse, if you're deliberately lying?" "I'm not lying." Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I know you don't know me. I know I'm nobody. But I'm telling you the truth. In 6 weeks, you're going to marry a woman who's planning to betray you before you've even finished your vows." For a long, horrible moment, he just stared at her. She couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if he was about to thank her or have her thrown out. Then he said, very quietly, "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Why what?" "Why tell me? You don't know me. You'd have nothing to gain and everything to lose by making this accusation. If you're wrong, your reputation is destroyed. If you're right, you've made an enemy of one of the most powerful families in England." His eyes narrowed. "So why risk it?" Eliza swallowed hard. "Because it's the truth. And because—" She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "Because I've spent my whole life watching people, being invisible. And I've learned that the worst thing you can do to someone isn't hate them. It's let them walk blindly into a trap when you could have warned them." Something flickered in his expression, too fast to identify. "You understand," he said slowly, "that I can't simply take your word for this, that without proof—" "Then get proof." She met his eyes. "Go to the Rose Gardens, midnight." She told him she'd meet him there again tomorrow night. "See for yourself." The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "If you're lying to me, Miss Whitmore, I will destroy you, your family, your reputation, everything." "I know." Her voice didn't shake. "But I'm not lying." He studied her for another heartbeat. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. "Midnight tomorrow. The Rose Gardens." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Miss Whitmore? Until then, you will not speak of this to anyone. Not your family, not your friends, no one. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Grace." He walked away without another word, disappearing back into the crowd as if the conversation had never happened. Eliza stood alone in the alcove, her heart hammering, her hands shaking again now that it was over. She'd done it. She'd told the truth. And tomorrow night, everything would change. Mom. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Eliza stayed in her room, claiming a headache. Her mother fussed and worried, convinced she'd offended someone important at the ball. Her father stopped by briefly to remind her that Lord Pemberton had expressed interest, and perhaps she shouldn't be so quick to discourage respectable attention. She nodded and agreed and said all the right things, while inside her mind replayed the conversation in the gardens over and over. 6 more weeks. The wedding, the honeymoon, and then we'll have everything we need. She hadn't misheard, hadn't imagined it, but doubt crept in anyway, whispering that she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd misinterpreted, that the Duke would go to the gardens, find nothing, and return convinced she was either a liar or a fool. By 11:30 that night, she was pacing her bedroom, too anxious to sleep. By 11:45, she'd made a decision. She had to go. Had to see for herself. If Serena didn't show, if Eliza had been wrong, then at least she'd know before the Duke ruined her family in retribution. And if she'd been right, she didn't let herself finish that thought. Instead, she pulled on a dark cloak, slipped out through the servants' entrance, and made her way through London's midnight streets toward the Ashford estate. The gardens were locked, but the wall was climbable if you didn't care about ruining your dress. Eliza didn't. She hauled herself over the stone barrier, dropped into a flower bed, and picked her way through the darkness toward the rose gardens. She could hear voices before she saw anything, low and urgent. Heart pounding, she crept closer, using the hedges for cover. The rose garden was lit by a single lantern hung from a decorative arch. In its golden light, Serena Caldwell stood wrapped in Lord Hartley's arms, kissing him like the world was ending. And 6 feet away, partially hidden by shadows, the Duke of Blackthorn stood watching. Eliza's breath stopped. She couldn't see his expression. Didn't need to. The rigid set of his shoulders, the absolute stillness. It was the body language of a man watching his future crumble. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Serena pulled back from the kiss, laughing softly. "We should go. Someone might—" She turned and saw the Duke. The color drained from her face. "Adrian." His name came out as barely a whisper. This isn't— "Don't!" His voice was colder than Eliza had ever heard another human being speak. "Don't insult us both by trying to explain this away." Hartley stepped forward, hand on his sword hilt, a threat or a defense, Eliza couldn't tell. "Blackthorn, if you will leave." The Duke didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "Now, before I forget that killing you would cause more scandal than you're worth." For a moment, Eliza thought Hartley might actually be stupid enough to argue, but something in the Duke's expression convinced him otherwise. He backed away, hands raised, then turned and fled into the darkness, leaving Serena and the Duke alone. "How long?" The Duke's question was quiet, deadly. Serena lifted her chin, and Eliza saw something remarkable happen. The tears, the fear, they vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Does it matter?" Her voice was hard now. "You were always going to be a means to an end, Adrian. You must have known that." "I knew you didn't love me." He sounded almost conversational. "I didn't realize you held me in quite such contempt." "Love?" She laughed bitterly. "You wanted a beautiful wife to produce beautiful children and grace your dinner parties. I wanted access to your fortune. We both knew exactly what this marriage was. The difference being, I would have honored my vows." "How noble," her lip curled. "How typically, tediously noble. Tell me, Your Grace, did you think I'd actually be content living in your shadow? Playing the dutiful Duchess while you collected art and attended Parliament and ignored me except when you needed an ornament on your arm?" "I thought," he said slowly, "that you had enough honor not to betray me before the wedding had even taken place." "Honor?" She spat the word. "What do you know about honor? You're buying a wife the way you'd buy a horse. At least Edmund actually wants me." "Wants your face," the Duke corrected coldly. "Wants my money. Whether he wants you remains to be seen." Serena's hand cracked across his face. The slap echoed through the garden. The Duke didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood there with a red mark blooming on his cheek and that terrible, empty expression. "We're done," he said quietly. "The engagement is over. If you or Hartley come near me or mine again, I will destroy you both so thoroughly that no one in England will speak your names without laughing. Do you understand?" "You can't—" Serena's composure finally cracked. "Adrian, please, if you end this, the scandal will ruin me. My family should have raised you better." He turned away. "Goodbye, Serena." He walked past her without another glance, his footsteps steady and measured on the gravel path, leaving Serena standing alone in the lantern light, shaking with rage and something that might have been fear, and leaving Eliza pressed against the hedge, her heart hammering, realizing she'd just watched the social event of the decade unfold. The Duke of Blackthorn had just ended his engagement to the most celebrated woman in London. Because of her. Because she'd told the truth. Eliza made it home before dawn, her dress ruined and her hands scraped from climbing the garden wall twice in one night. She slipped through the servants' entrance, up the back stairs, and into her bedroom without waking anyone. Then she sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing her cloak, and waited for the world to end. It didn't take long. By noon the next day, every drawing room in London was buzzing with the news. The Duke of Blackthorn had ended his engagement to Lady Serena Caldwell. No explanation given, no warning, just a terse announcement delivered to her family's residence at breakfast, followed by a formal notice to be published in the papers. Society erupted. Eliza's mother burst into her room at 12:30, waving a letter like a declaration of war. "Have you heard? The Duke and Serena. Finished, just like that. After all those months of planning, the trousseau already ordered, the church reserved." "I heard." Eliza kept her voice carefully neutral, her hands folded in her lap to hide the shaking. Everyone's saying it must be her family's fault. Some scandal about her brother's gambling debts, or perhaps her mother said something inappropriate. Her mother paused, eyes narrowing. "You're very pale, dear. Are you still feeling unwell?" "Just tired, Mama." "Well, rest up. We're dining at the Ashfords tonight, and you need to look presentable. Everyone who matters will be there, and with Serena out of the picture, well, opportunities arise in the most unexpected places." She swept out, already planning social strategies, completely unaware that her daughter had just set fire to the entire structure of London's aristocratic marriage market. Eliza stayed in her room until the dinner was unavoidable, then dressed in another forgettable gown and prepared herself for an evening of watching people dissect a scandal she'd caused. The Ashford dining room seated 40. Every chair was filled with London's elite, all of them vibrating with barely contained curiosity. Serena was notably absent. In disgrace, rumor said, confined to her family's country estate until the scandal died down. The Duke was also absent, which was somehow even more damning. Eliza found herself seated between a pompous cousin of Lord Ashford and an elderly widow who spent the entire first course complaining about her digestion. She kept her head down, said little, and tried to disappear into the wallpaper the way she always had. Then Lady Ashford stood, tapping her crystal glass with a silver spoon. "My dear friends, I know we're all simply devastated by recent events." Her voice dripped with false sympathy. Poor Serena must be beside herself. To be discarded so publicly, without even the courtesy of a private conversation. "From what I hear," someone interrupted from the far end of the table, "she's fortunate Blackthorn didn't horsewhip her brother in the street." The gasps rippled through the room. "What on earth are you suggesting?" Lady Ashford's hand flew to her throat. "I'm suggesting," the speaker continued, Lord Moresby, Eliza realized, a man known for collecting gossip like other men collected stamps, that perhaps the ending wasn't quite as one-sided as Serena would like us to believe. "Moresby, really?" Lord Ashford tried to redirect the conversation. "This is hardly appropriate dinner conversation." "Oh, come now, we're all thinking it." Moresby leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "The Duke discovers something, ends the engagement immediately. Serena's family sends her to the country faster than you can say scandal. And then there's the matter of Lord Hartley also departing London rather suddenly for an extended tour of the continent." The silence that followed could have shattered glass. "Lord Hartley?" someone whispered. "But he's Serena's cousin." "Fourth cousin," Moresby corrected. "Barely related at all, really." The implications spread through the room like poison. Eliza watched faces transform, shock giving way to scandalized delight, as people began connecting pieces they'd been too polite to examine before. Well, Lady Ashford recovered first, her smile sharp as a knife. How utterly unfortunate. One can only imagine what the Duke must have discovered. One needn't imagine, a new voice cut in. One could simply ask. Every head turned. The Duke of Blackthorn stood in the doorway. He looked exactly the same as he had 2 nights ago. Perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, absolutely unreadable, but there was something different in the set of his shoulders. Something harder. Lord Ashford rose, stammering, "Your Grace, we weren't expecting clearly." The Duke's gaze swept the room, cold and assessing. "Forgive the intrusion. I came to discuss a business matter, but I see dinner is underway." "Nonsense, nonsense. Please join us." Ashford was already signaling servants to set another place. "We'd be honored." The Duke's eyes found Eliza. She stopped breathing. For 3 endless heartbeats, he simply looked at her. His expression gave away nothing, but she felt the weight of that stare like a physical thing, pinning her to her chair. Then he looked away, and she could breathe again. "Actually," the Duke said smoothly, "I wonder if I might borrow Miss Whitmore for a moment. There's a matter concerning her father's business that requires clarification." The room went absolutely silent. Eliza's mother looked like she might faint from shock and social triumph combined. Her father jerked upright, clearly trying to remember what business he might possibly have with a duke. And 40 pairs of eyes swiveled to stare at Eliza like she'd suddenly grown a second head. Of course, Your Grace." She stood on shaking legs, dropping her napkin. "Whatever you need." He didn't offer his arm, just turned and walked back into the hallway, clearly expecting her to follow. She did, acutely aware of every whisper that erupted the moment she left the room. The Duke led her to Lord Ashford's study, a book-lined room that smelled of leather and tobacco. He closed the door behind them, and suddenly the space felt very small. "Miss Whitmore." He turned to face her, and she still couldn't read his expression. "It seems I owe you an apology." That was not what she'd expected. "Your Grace." "I doubted you. I threatened you. I implied you were lying for your own gain." His voice remained even, controlled. "You were telling the truth. Everything you said was accurate, so I apologize." Eliza's throat felt tight. "You don't need to—" "Yes, I do." He cut her off, not unkindly. "You risked everything to warn a stranger. That deserves better than threats." For a moment they just stood there, the silence stretching between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Then Eliza said quietly, "What did you say to her? After I left?" Something flickered in his eyes. "I told her we were done. That if she or Hartley came near me again, I'd destroy them both." "And she believed you?" "She's currently in Northumberland explaining to her family why their most advantageous match in 3 generations just evaporated." His mouth twisted. "So yes, I believe she understood." "I'm sorry." The words came out before she could stop them. "I know you cared for her." "I didn't." The correction was swift and brutal. "I respected the arrangement. I would have honored my vows, but love?" He shook his head. "That was never part of the equation." "Then why are you angry?" The question seemed to surprise him. He studied her for a long moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because I just don't like being made a fool. Because I built my entire reputation on control and calculation, and she made me look like a blind idiot stumbling into a trap." He paused. "And because if you hadn't spoken up, I would have married her, given her access to everything. And by the time I discovered the truth, it would have been too late." Eliza swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" "Now?" His smile was cold. "Now, London society will spend the next 6 months dissecting every detail of my failed engagement while I pretend not to care. Serena will weather the scandal, or she won't. And you—" He stopped. "And I?" she prompted. "You've made an enemy," he said bluntly. "A powerful one. Serena won't forget who destroyed her engagement. And she has friends, allies, people who will believe her version of events over yours." "I know." Eliza's voice was steadier than she felt. I knew that when I told you. The Duke regarded her with something that might have been respect. Then you're braver than most of the men I know. Before she could respond, the study door burst open. Eliza's mother stood there, flushed and agitated. Eliza, whatever are you doing closeted alone with— Oh! She saw the Duke and nearly collapsed into a curtsy. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. I was simply concerned for my daughter's reputation. Your concern is noted, Mrs. Whitmore. The Duke's voice cooled several degrees. But unnecessary. I was simply thanking your daughter for bringing a certain matter to my attention. A matter? Her mother's eyes widened. What matter? Eliza, what have you done? Everything, Eliza thought. I've done everything. But the Duke spoke before she could. Nothing inappropriate, I assure you. In fact, your daughter showed remarkable perception and discretion. You should be proud. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Whitmore, thank you, truly. Then he was gone, leaving Eliza alone with her mother's bewildered questions and the growing certainty that her life had just become exponentially more complicated. She was right. The first wave hit 3 days later. Eliza was taking tea with her mother and two of her mother's friends when Lady Pemberton arrived, ostensibly to discuss an upcoming charity auction. But the moment the pleasantries were finished, she turned to Eliza with a smile like poisoned honey. Tell me, dear, is it true you had a private audience with the Duke of Blackthorn at the Ashfords' dinner? The room went silent. Briefly, Eliza said carefully, he had a question about my father's business. How fascinating. Lady Pemberton's smile sharpened. And what business would that be, exactly? I wasn't aware your father dealt with dukes. He doesn't, typically. So unusual, then, for a duke to single out the daughter of a minor businessman for private conversation. She sipped her tea delicately. One might almost think there was another reason. Eliza's mother stiffened. I'm sure I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, dear Constance, merely observing. Lady Pemberton set down her cup. It's just that certain rumors have been circulating about how the Duke came to discover Serena's indiscretions. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. What rumors? Eliza's mother demanded. Well, Lady Pemberton leaned forward conspiratorially. They say someone told him. Someone who was at the ball that night. Someone who overheard poor Serena in a private moment and ran straight to the Duke with tales. That's absurd, one of the other ladies protested. Who would do such a thing? Who indeed? Lady Pemberton's gaze fixed on Eliza like a butterfly pinned to a board. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, where were you the night of the Ashford ball? I don't recall seeing you in the ballroom for quite some time. Every eye turned to Eliza. Her mother's face was pale. Eliza? I stepped outside for air, Eliza said quietly. I wasn't feeling well. Air? How convenient, Lady Pemberton smiled. And you saw nothing unusual? Heard nothing of interest? I walked in the gardens for a few minutes, then I came back inside. And spoke to the Duke of Blackthorn. Briefly. About business. Yes. Lady Pemberton sat back satisfied. How very, very interesting. The visit ended shortly after, but the damage was done. Eliza could see it in her mother's face, in the way the other ladies whispered as they left. The moment they were alone, her mother turned on her. Tell me the truth, right now. Did you have anything to do with the Duke ending his engagement? Eliza met her eyes. I told him something he needed to know. You what? Her mother's voice rose to a shriek. Do you have any idea what you've done? Any idea at all? I told the truth. You destroyed the social alliance of the season. You made an enemy of one of the most powerful families in England. And for what? Her mother pressed her hands to her temples. For what, Eliza? Because it was the right thing to do. The right thing? Her mother laughed, high and brittle. You stupid, stupid girl. There is no right thing. There's only survival, and you've just signed your own death warrant. She wasn't entirely wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, invitations dried up. Calling cards went unanswered. Women who'd been friendly, or at least polite, suddenly discovered urgent reasons to be elsewhere when Eliza appeared. And the whispers started. Conniving little thing, isn't she? Always knew there was something sly about the Whitmores. Probably made the whole thing up to trap the Duke herself. Poor Serena, destroyed by jealousy and lies. Eliza endured it with her head high and her face calm, even as her world contracted to the four walls of her family's townhouse. Even her own cousins stopped calling. Her father's business partner canceled a major contract, citing concerns about association. "This is your fault," her mother hissed over breakfast one morning, slamming down a letter. "Lady Ashford has canceled her order for your father's shipment. That's £3,000 we've just lost because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." Eliza said nothing. What was there to say? But that afternoon, something changed. A carriage arrived at their door. Black lacquer with a ducal crest on the side. Eliza's mother went white. "He's here. The Duke is here. Eliza, what have you—" But it wasn't the Duke who entered their drawing room. It was his secretary, a thin man with sharp eyes and a portfolio under his arm. "Miss Whitmore, I have a message from His Grace." Yes?" Eliza stood, her heart hammering. The secretary handed her an envelope, heavy paper, the Duke's seal. She broke it open with shaking hands. The letter was brief. "Miss Whitmore, it has come to my attention that you are suffering social consequences for the service you rendered me. This is unacceptable. I will be calling on your family tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Please ensure you are available. Blackthorn." Eliza read it twice, trying to understand. "He's coming here?" "Tomorrow at 2, the secretary confirmed. "His Grace also asked me to deliver this." He produced a second envelope, this one addressed to her father. "Instructions regarding a new business opportunity. His Grace believes your father's expertise would be valuable for a project involving his northern estates." Her mother snatched the letter, read it, and went even paler. He's offering a contract worth—" She looked up, eyes wide. "Why?" The secretary's expression remained neutral. "His Grace values loyalty and honesty. Good day." He left, and Eliza stood holding the Duke's letter while her mother stared at the business proposal like it might explode. "I don't understand," her mother whispered. "Why would he help us? Unless—" Her eyes widened. "Eliza, does the Duke have intentions?" "No." The denial burst out automatically. "Of course not. He's being honorable, that's all." But her mother's expression had shifted into something calculating and hopeful and terrifying. "A Duke calling on you. Tomorrow." "Mama, it's not like that. Wear the blue silk. No, the green. And we'll need to clean the drawing room properly and have cook prepare something suitable." "Mama, please." But her mother was already racing through the house, shouting orders to servants, her earlier fury completely forgotten in the face of potential social redemption. Eliza sank into a chair, the Duke's letter still clutched in her hand, and wondered what on earth she'd gotten herself into. The next day, at precisely 2 o'clock, the Duke of Blackthorn arrived. Eliza's mother had spent the previous 18 hours transforming their modest townhouse into something resembling a respectable receiving room. Flowers everywhere. The good china. Her father dressed in his finest coat, looking like a man facing execution and promotion simultaneously. When the Duke entered, he dominated the space immediately. Too tall, too self-assured, too everything for their small drawing room. "Mr. Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore." He nodded to them both. "Thank you for receiving me." "Your Grace!" Her mother practically vibrated with anxious delight. "What an honor. Please sit. May we offer you tea? Or perhaps—" "Tea would be lovely. Thank you." He sat, and Eliza noticed he'd chosen the chair closest to where she'd positioned herself near the window. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," her father found his voice. "Though I must say, Your Grace, we were surprised by your generous offer. The Northern Estates project—" "A genuine need," the Duke interrupted smoothly. "I've reviewed your work. Your reputation for quality is exactly what the project requires." They talked business for 15 minutes, her father slowly relaxing as he realized the Duke's offer was legitimate. Her mother poured tea with trembling hands and tried very hard not to stare, and Eliza sat quietly, watching the performance, trying to understand what the Duke was actually doing. Then he turned to her. "Miss Whitmore, I wonder if I might impose on you for a brief walk in your garden. I have a matter to discuss." The garden was barely 10 feet square, but her mother leaped on the suggestion like it was an invitation to Buckingham Palace. Of course. What a lovely idea. Eliza, do accompany His Grace. They stepped outside into the tiny courtyard, and the moment the door closed behind them, the Duke's careful politeness dropped. You're being targeted, he said bluntly. Eliza blinked. I'm aware. Serena's spreading rumors, claiming you fabricated everything out of jealousy, that you're trying to trap me. His jaw tightened. Half of London believes her. And the other half? Isn't sure what to believe, which is almost worse. He turned to face her fully. I came here to make my position clear. To anyone watching, and believe me, everyone is watching, I am publicly acknowledging that you did me a service, that I owe you, and that anyone who treats you with disrespect will answer to me. Eliza's breath caught. You can't do that. I can do whatever I choose. No, you don't understand. If you defend me publicly, people will assume, they'll think that I have intentions toward you. His mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Let them. That's insane. She stepped back. You barely know me. And the scandal already exists, he cut her off. The only question is who controls the narrative. Right now, Serena is painting you as a scheming social climber. I'm offering an alternative story, that you're a woman of principle who saved me from a disastrous marriage. By visiting me? By offering my father business contracts. By treating you as someone worth defending. He held her gaze. You risked everything to tell me the truth. The least I can do is prevent you from being destroyed for it. Eliza's throat felt tight. People will still talk. People always talk, he shrugged. But they'll think twice before they do it to your face. And over time, the truth will become clear that Serena betrayed me, you warned me, and anyone claiming otherwise is either a fool or a liar. And if that doesn't work, his smile turned sharp, then I'll make it work. They stood in silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun filtering through the small courtyard. Eliza could hear her mother's anxious whispers through the window, probably convinced a proposal was imminent. Why? She asked quietly. Why go to all this trouble for someone you barely know? The Duke was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because the last time someone told me an uncomfortable truth, I ignored them. My father warned me about a business partner who was embezzling from our estates. I thought he was being paranoid. By the time I realized he was right, we'd lost nearly 50,000 pounds. Eliza's eyes widened. I learned something from that, the Duke continued, that the truth matters more than comfort, more than appearances, more than avoiding scandal. He met her eyes. You gave me the truth when you had every reason to stay silent. That's not something I take lightly. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Her mother stood there, flushed and excited. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but Lord and Lady Ashford have just arrived for a visit, quite unexpected, and they're asking after you. The Duke's expression shifted into something predatory. How convenient. Shall we? They returned to the drawing room to find Lord and Lady Ashford perched uncomfortably on the sofa, clearly trying to understand why a Duke's carriage was parked outside the Whitmore residence. Blackthorn! Lord Ashford stood quickly. Didn't expect to find you here. No? The Duke's tone was pleasant, dangerous. I'm calling on the Whitmores, discussing business, and thanking Miss Whitmore again for her invaluable assistance. Lady Ashford's eyes narrowed. Assistance? Indeed. He turned to Eliza and she saw the trap closing. Miss Whitmore brought a troubling matter to my attention several weeks ago, a matter of loyalty and truth that required immediate action. The room went silent. I see. Lady Ashford's smile was sharp. How very enterprising of her. I'd call it principled, the Duke corrected. Brave, even. It takes courage to speak truth to power, particularly when that truth might prove inconvenient. Or profitable, Lady Ashford murmured. The Duke's expression went cold. I beg your pardon? Nothing, Your Grace. Simply observing that some people have a talent for inserting themselves into situations where they might benefit. The only people who benefited, the Duke said quietly, were those who wanted me walking blindly into betrayal. Miss Whitmore gained nothing but trouble from her honesty, which is precisely why I'm here, to ensure that trouble doesn't follow her any further. The threat was barely veiled. Lady Ashford's face went tight. Of course, she said stiffly. We would never suggest. Good. He turned back to Eliza's parents. Mr. Whitmore, I'll have my secretary draw up the contracts for the Northern Project. Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for the tea. And Miss Whitmore. He nodded to her. I hope I'll see you at the Pemberton Ball next week. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command delivered in front of witnesses who would spread the news across London before sunset. Then he was gone, leaving behind a silence that could have shattered glass. Lady Ashford stood abruptly. We should be going. So soon? Eliza's mother's voice was sticky sweet with triumph. Yes. Quite pressing matters to attend to. She swept toward the door, then paused, looking back at Eliza. You've made quite an impression on His Grace, Miss Whitmore. I do hope you know what you're doing. The words were civil. The tone was pure poison. The moment they left, Eliza's mother grabbed her shoulders. Did you hear that? He's calling on you again. He wants you at the Pemberton Ball. Eliza, do you understand what this means? It means he's being kind, Eliza said weakly. It means, her father cut in, his voice strange, that we need to be very, very careful. The Duke is a powerful man, but he's also making powerful enemies by defending you. If this goes wrong, it won't, her mother insisted. It can't. This is our chance, don't you see? Our daughter, noticed by a duke. But Eliza barely heard them. She was thinking about Lady Ashford's parting words, the venom hidden beneath courtesy. The Duke had just painted a target on her back in bold, unmistakable strokes. And somewhere in London, Serena Caldwell was watching. The letter arrived 3 days before the Pemberton Ball, delivered by a street child who vanished before the butler could ask questions. Plain paper. No signature, just 5 words written in elegant feminine script. Stay away from him. Final warning. Eliza burned it in her bedroom fireplace and said nothing to anyone. The second letter came the next morning. This time it was more explicit. You think he cares about you? You're a tool he's using to save face. The moment you're no longer useful, he'll discard you like the trash you are. She burned that one too, but her hands shook doing it. The third letter didn't come. Instead, she woke to find her mother white-faced at the breakfast table, clutching a newspaper. What's happened? Eliza asked, though dread already coiled in her stomach. Her mother silently pushed the paper across the table. The society column. 3 paragraphs about the upcoming Pemberton Ball. And buried in the middle, like a knife between the ribs. Among those expected to attend is Miss Eliza Whitmore, whose sudden rise in social standing has been the subject of much speculation. Sources close to the situation suggest Miss Whitmore's friendship with a certain recently unattached duke may have originated long before his recent romantic disappointment. One wonders if Miss Whitmore's timely intervention in said duke's affairs was quite as altruistic as some have claimed. They're saying you planned it, her mother whispered, that you wanted him all along, that you destroyed Serena's engagement deliberately. That's not true. I know that, her mother's voice cracked. But truth doesn't matter, Eliza. Perception matters. And right now, half of London thinks you're a conniving social climber who orchestrated the scandal of the season. The Duke knows the truth. The Duke is one man. Serena has an entire family, decades of social connections, and nothing left to lose. Her mother pressed her hands to her temples. You need to withdraw from the ball. Stay home. Let this die down. If I hide, they'll say I'm guilty. If you go, they'll tear you apart in public. They stared at each other across the breakfast table, and Eliza realized with cold clarity that there was no safe choice. Hiding meant guilt. Attending meant walking into an ambush. Either way, she lost. I'm going, she said quietly. Eliza, I'm going, because if I don't, Serena wins. She gets to rewrite history, paint herself as the victim, and destroy my family's reputation without anyone challenging her story. She stood, folding the newspaper with deliberate precision. I told the truth. I'm not going to apologize for it. Her mother looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then wear the green silk, and for heaven's sake, hold your head high. The days before this ball crawled by with agonizing slowness. More whispers, more cut-direct encounters in shops. Her father's business partner sent a letter politely requesting they postpone their partnership until social circumstances stabilized. Translation: until the scandal passed or destroyed them completely. But the Duke kept his word. He sent flowers, called twice, ostensibly to discuss business with her father, but always finding time to speak with Eliza. Made it clear to anyone watching that his regard for the Whitmore family, and for Eliza specifically, remained unchanged, which only made the rumors worse. "He's courting you," her mother said wonderingly after his second visit. "Actually courting you." "He's being honorable," Eliza corrected. "That's all." But she'd caught herself watching for his carriage, listening for his voice. And when he'd asked her opinion on a book they'd both read, she'd forgotten to be nervous and just talked to him like he was a person instead of a title. That had been the most dangerous part. The moment when she'd looked up and found him watching her with something warm and unguarded in his eyes, and realized she was in terrible, terrible trouble. The night of the Pemberton ball arrived like an execution date. Eliza dressed in the green silk, her best gown, though still modest compared to what most women would wear. Her mother fussed over her hair, pinning it in elaborate curls that felt too heavy on her head. Her father gave her an awkward, worried hug before they left. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We could still turn back." "No," Eliza said. "We couldn't." The Pemberton mansion blazed with lights, every window golden against the night sky. Carriages lined the street, disgorging London's elite in a river of silk and jewels. Eliza's family arrived in their modest coach, and she felt every eye turn to watch them enter. The whispers started immediately. She held her head high and walked into the ballroom like she belonged there. The Pemberton ballroom was larger than the Ashfords', more ostentatious. Gilt everywhere, mirrors multiplying the crowd into infinity. At least 300 people packed into the space, all of them dressed to impress and armed with gossip. Eliza scanned the crowd and found the Duke immediately. He stood near the terrace doors, talking with Lord Pemberton, but his eyes found hers across the room. He nodded once, barely perceptible. She relaxed fractionally. At least she wasn't facing this alone. "Eliza, darling!" A voice like poisoned honey cut through her thoughts. Lady Ashford materialized beside her, resplendent in purple silk and false sympathy. "How brave of you to attend. After everything that's been said, I wasn't sure you'd show your face." "Why wouldn't I?" Eliza kept her voice level. "I have nothing to hide." "Of course not." Lady Ashford's smile could have cut glass. "Though I must say the timing of your friendship with the Duke does raise questions. Only for people determined to think the worst, or people who remember that you were at the Ashford ball the night of the scandal, that you disappeared into the gardens for quite some time, and that you had a private conversation with the Duke immediately afterward." Lady Ashford leaned closer. "Convenient, wouldn't you say?" Before Eliza could respond, another voice cut in. "I'd call it observant." They both turned. The Duke stood there, his expression pleasant and his eyes cold as winter. "Your Grace!" Lady Ashford's tone brightened artificially. "We were just discussing—" "I heard what you were discussing." He turned to Eliza. "Miss Whitmore, I believe you promised me the first dance." She hadn't, but she took his offered arm anyway. "Of course, Your Grace." He led her onto the dance floor as a waltz began, and suddenly they were surrounded by other couples, moving in synchronized circles beneath the chandeliers. "You didn't have to do that," Eliza murmured. "Yes, I did." His hand was steady on her waist, guiding her through the steps. "Ashford's been spreading rumors for weeks. Someone needs to shut her up. By dancing with me, that'll just fuel more speculation. Let them speculate." He spun her precisely, perfectly. "I'd rather have them talking about our supposed romance than about Serena's lies." Eliza stumbled slightly. "Our what? Haven't you heard?" His mouth curved in something that wasn't quite humor. "We're madly in love. Have been for months. You seduced me at the Ashford ball, convinced me to abandon Serena, and now we're plotting to elope to Gretna Green. That's insane." "That's society." He steadied her easily. "The truth is too complicated. They need a simple story." "So they've created one, and you're just accepting that?" "I'm using it." He met her eyes. "If people think I have feelings for you, they'll be less likely to attack you directly. No one wants to make an enemy of a lovesick Duke." "You're not lovesick." Something flickered in his expression. "No, but I'm grateful." and protective of people who deserve better than what London's offering you. The music swelled. They turned together, perfectly matched, and Eliza realized with a start that she'd stopped thinking about the steps. That dancing with him felt natural, easy, dangerous. "After this dance," she said quietly, "you should partner with someone else. Someone more appropriate, before people get the wrong idea." "What if I don't care about appropriate?" Her breath caught. "Your Grace." "Adrian." The correction was quiet. "When we're private, or as private as one can be in a ballroom, you can call me Adrian."
We shouldn't. Why not? You've already ruined my engagement and destroyed my carefully planned future. Might as well be on a first-name basis. She looked up and found him almost smiling, actually smiling. It transformed his face from intimidating to something approachable. Human. "You're enjoying this," she accused. "Parts of it." His hand tightened fractionally on her waist. "The part where Lady Ashford looks like she's swallowed a lemon?" "Absolutely." "The part where you're here, holding your head high despite everything?" "Also enjoyable." "I'm terrified." "I know, but you're still here. That takes spine." The music ended. They separated according to protocol, but his eyes held hers for one beat longer than necessary. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Whitmore." "Your Grace." He bowed and walked away, leaving her standing alone on the edge of the dance floor, with her heart hammering and her thoughts in chaos. She'd almost made it back to her mother when she saw her. Serena Caldwell stood at the top of the main staircase, dressed in white, like a bride at her own funeral. She looked thinner than Eliza remembered, paler, but still beautiful in the way that made other women feel inadequate. The ballroom fell silent. "What is she doing here?" someone whispered. "She's supposed to be in Northumberland." Serena descended the stairs slowly, deliberately, every eye on her. She crossed the ballroom floor toward the Duke, who turned to face her with an expression carved from stone. "Adrian," her voice carried across the sudden quiet. "We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Please." She reached for his arm. "Just 5 minutes. Let me explain." "Explain what?" His voice was cold. "How you plan to marry me for my money while maintaining an affair with your cousin? Or perhaps how you've spent the past month spreading lies about an innocent woman to cover your own guilt?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Serena's face flushed. "Is that what she told you? That I'm lying?" "That's what the truth tells me." "Truth?" Serena's voice rose, trembling. "You want to talk about truth? Then let's discuss why you're really here, why you're dancing with her, defending her, making a spectacle of yourself." "Careful," the Duke said softly. "You're on very thin ice." "Am I, or are you?" Serena spun to face the crowd, and Eliza saw the desperation in her eyes. "You all think you know what happened, that I betrayed him, that she nobly warned him. But what if I told you the real story?" "Serena," the Duke's voice held a warning. "Don't." "What if I told you," Serena continued, her voice rising, "that Miss Whitmore has been obsessed with the Duke for months? That she followed him, watched him, waited for an opportunity to insert herself into his life?" "That's not true," Eliza said, but her voice was too quiet to carry. "What if I showed you proof?" Serena pulled something from her reticule, an envelope. A letter, written by Miss Whitmore herself, addressed to her cousin, describing in detail her feelings for a certain Duke she'd been admiring from afar. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Eliza's blood went cold. She had written such a letter months ago, before the engagement was even announced. A silly, private confession to her cousin Margaret about finding the Duke intriguing. She'd been reading too many novels, feeling romantic. It had meant nothing, but in Serena's hands, it meant everything. "Where did you get that?" the Duke demanded. "From someone who cares about the truth." Serena's smile was vicious. "Should I read it aloud? Let everyone hear how Miss Whitmore described watching you at parties, imagining conversations, hoping you might notice her." "Reading someone's private correspondence proves nothing except that you're a thief," the Duke said coldly. "It proves motive." Serena turned back to the crowd. She wanted him. She saw her chance when she overheard, or claimed to overhear, something in the gardens.
and she used that opportunity to destroy my engagement and position herself as his savior. That's a lie, Eliza said, louder now. Yes, I wrote that letter. Yes, I thought the Duke was interesting. But what I overheard was real. You and Lord Hartley planning to continue your affair after the wedding. I didn't imagine it, and I didn't fabricate it. So you say. Serena's voice was cold. But who's to verify your story? You were alone in the gardens, no witnesses, just your word against mine. My word, the Duke cut in, verified by what I saw with my own eyes. You kissing Hartley, planning your deception, or have you forgotten that part? I haven't forgotten that you believed her over me without question. Serena's voice cracked. That you threw away our engagement based on the word of a woman you didn't even know. I threw away our engagement because you were betraying me. Was I? Serena's eyes filled with tears. Or was I manipulated into a position where it would look that way? Edmund is my cousin. We're close. We always have been. Maybe what she heard was innocent. Maybe she twisted it into something sordid because she wanted you for herself. The crowd was riveted. This was better than theater, better than anything London had seen in years. And Eliza realized with horrible clarity that Serena was winning, because the truth was complicated and messy and required people to believe a nobody over a celebrated beauty. But Serena's story was simple, clean. It played into everyone's worst assumptions about social climbing girls and calculating outsiders. This is absurd, the Duke said, but there was an edge of frustration in his voice now. You're rewriting history. I'm telling my side. Serena turned to him, tears streaming down her face. You never let me explain. You just believed her and threw me aside like I meant nothing. And now you're parading her around like some kind of trophy while I'm exiled to the country in disgrace. You exiled yourself when you chose to betray me. I didn't betray you. Her voice rose to a shriek. I loved you. I was going to marry you, and she destroyed everything because she wanted what was mine. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Eliza felt 300 pairs of eyes turned to her, judging, assessing, wondering if maybe, possibly, the beautiful, tearful woman was telling the truth. Her throat closed. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading, where the lie became more believable than reality because reality was too strange to accept. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Actually, I can verify her story. Everyone turned. Lord Edmund Hartley stood in the doorway. Eliza's heart stopped. Serena went white. Hartley walked into the ballroom like a man approaching his own hanging. He looked terrible, thinner, unshaven, his clothes disheveled, like he'd ridden hard from somewhere far away. Edmund? Serena's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? Something I should have done weeks ago. He turned to face the crowd, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Miss Whitmore is telling the truth. Serena and I have been lovers for over a year. We plan to continue the affair after her marriage to the Duke. Everything Miss Whitmore claims to have overheard, she did overhear, because we said it, all of it. The ballroom exploded. Serena lunged toward him. You bastard! How could I let you destroy an innocent woman to save your own reputation? Hartley's laugh was bitter. Surprisingly easily at first, but then I watched you turn into someone I didn't recognize, someone cruel, and I realized I couldn't be part of it anymore. I'm cruel? Serena's voice rose to a shriek. I'm the one who's been ruined, cast out, humiliated. By your own choices. Hartley turned to the Duke. Your Grace, I apologize. For the deception, for the everything. You deserved better. The Duke's expression was unreadable. Why come forward now? Because I'm a coward, but not enough of one to watch Serena destroy Miss Whitmore the way we planned to destroy you. Hartley's shoulders slumped. I'm leaving for America tomorrow. I needed to do this first. He turned and walked toward the exit. Serena screamed after him, but he didn't look back. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, eyes turned from the doorway back to Serena, back to the woman standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, her beautiful face twisted with rage and humiliation. You're all fools, she spat. Every one of you. You think she's innocent? She's manipulative, calculating. She's using him just like... Enough. The Duke's voice cut like a blade. You've lost, Serena. Accept it with whatever dignity you have left. For a moment, Eliza thought Serena might actually attack him. Her hands clenched into fists, her whole body shaking. Then she turned and ran, out of the ballroom, down the stairs, into the night. The whispers started immediately, but this time they weren't about Eliza. They were about Serena, about the scandal, about how spectacular the fall had been. Lady Ashford appeared beside Eliza, her expression carefully neutral. Well, that was unexpected. Yes, Eliza managed. I may have misjudged the situation. It was clearly killing her to admit it. My apologies, Miss Whitmore. She swept away before Eliza could respond. The Duke materialized at Eliza's elbow. Are you all right? She nodded mutely, still trying to process what had just happened. Come on. He offered his arm. Let's get you some air. He led her out onto the terrace, away from the chaos, into the cool night. The noise of the ballroom faded behind them, replaced by the quiet sounds of the garden. I can't believe Hartley did that, Eliza whispered. Neither can I. The Duke leaned against the balustrade, looking out into the darkness. Though I suppose even cowards have their limits. She'll never forgive him. She'll never forgive you either. Or me. He turned to face her. You know that, don't you? This isn't over. Serena's been publicly humiliated in front of everyone who matters. She won't let that go. I know. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. But at least now people know the truth. Some people. Others will still believe her version. They'll say Hartley was coerced or lying or... He stopped. I'm sorry, you've been through enough tonight without me listing everything that could still go wrong. They stood in silence for a moment. Music drifted from the ballroom, voices, laughter, life continuing despite the drama. Thank you, Eliza said quietly, for defending me, for everything. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to stand by me. You could have what? Let Serena destroy you to save face? He shook his head. No. You told me the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. The least I can do is return the favor. He was standing very close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to realize that somewhere between the gardens and the ballroom, between scandal and defense, something had shifted between them. Adrian, she whispered. His expression softened. Eliza. He reached up, his hand hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her but wasn't sure he should. Then a scream shattered the night. They both spun toward the sound. It had come from the gardens, high and terrified, and cut off abruptly. What? Eliza started. The Duke was already moving, vaulting over the balustrade and running toward the sound. Eliza hiked up her skirts and followed, her heart hammering. They found her at the base of the garden fountain. Serena Caldwell, floating face down in the water, her white dress billowing around her like a shroud. And standing over her, pale and shaking, was Eliza's mother. Don't touch her! The Duke's command cracked through the night air. Eliza's mother stood frozen, her hand still extended toward the water where Serena floated motionless. Her face was white as bone, her eyes wide with shock. I didn't. She was already... Her voice broke. I found her like this. I swear. I just found her. The Duke was already moving, wading into the fountain without hesitation. He hauled Serena's body out of the water, laying her on the grass with surprising gentleness. Water streamed from her white dress, pooling on the ground. Is she... Eliza couldn't finish the question. Adrian pressed his fingers to Serena's throat, searching for a pulse. For 3 agonizing seconds, nobody breathed. Then Serena coughed. Water erupted from her mouth as her body convulsed, choking and gasping. She's alive. The Duke turned her on her side as she retched up more water. But we need a doctor. Now. I'll get help. Eliza turned to run back toward the house, but her mother grabbed her arm. Wait. Her mother's voice was tight with panic. Eliza, you have to believe me. I didn't do this. I came out for air. I heard something, and when I got here, she was already in the water. I believe you, Mama. Eliza squeezed her hand. But right now we need... No one will believe me. Her mother's fingers dug into Eliza's arm.
Don't you see? They'll think I tried to kill her, to protect you, to... Mrs. Whitmore. The Duke's voice was calm, authoritative. Go back to the ballroom. Find Lord Pemberton. Tell him there's been an accident and we need his physician immediately. Can you do that? Eliza's mother nodded mutely and fled toward the house, her skirts dragging through the wet grass. Leaving Eliza and the Duke alone with Serena, who was breathing now but barely conscious, shivering violently on the ground. We need to get her warm. Eliza started to remove her shawl, but the Duke was already shrugging out of his coat. Take this. Cover her. He handed her the expensive fabric without hesitation. I'm going to check the fountain, see if there's any sign of what happened. Eliza draped the coat over Serena's trembling form, tucking it around her shoulders. Up close, Serena looked smaller than she had in the ballroom, fragile. Her carefully arranged hair had come loose, streaming across her face in wet tangles. Serena, Eliza touched her shoulder gently. Can you hear me? What happened? Serena's eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were unfocused, confused. Then recognition dawned, and with it came something that looked almost like relief. You. Her voice was barely a whisper. You came. Of course I came. You were drowning. I wasn't. Serena's teeth chattered so hard she could barely speak. I didn't jump. Someone pushed me. Eliza's blood went cold. Who? But Serena's eyes had already closed again, consciousness slipping away. The Duke returned, his expression grim. The fountain edge is slippery. There's no railing. Easy enough to fall, especially in the dark. He paused. Or to be pushed. She said someone pushed her. His jaw tightened. Did she say who? No, she passed out again. They stared at each other in the darkness, the implication settling over them like a shroud. If someone had pushed Serena, if this was attempted murder, then everything had just become infinitely more complicated. Eliza. The Duke's voice was quiet, careful. Where was your mother when you left the terrace? The question hit like a physical blow. You can't possibly think, I don't think anything yet, but other people will. Your mother was found standing over Serena's body. She has motive, protecting her daughter from Serena's accusations. And she was alone in the gardens at the exact moment this happened. So were dozens of other people, so Eliza's voice rose. Anyone could have, anyone with a reason to want Serena dead or discredited. He held her gaze. Right now that list is very short, and your mother is at the top of it. Before Eliza could respond, voices erupted from the direction of the house. Light spilled across the gardens as what looked like half the ballroom poured out onto the terrace, drawn by news of the accident. Lord Pemberton appeared first, followed by a thin man carrying a medical bag. Behind them came a flood of aristocrats, all craning their necks to see the scandal. And in the middle of them, barely visible, Eliza's mother stood with her arms wrapped around herself, looking like a woman facing the gallows. The next hour was chaos. The physician examined Serena and declared her likely to survive, though she'd need careful monitoring. She was carried into the house and installed in one of the guest bedrooms. Lord Pemberton sent for the magistrate despite the late hour. Attempted murder, if that's what this was, couldn't wait until morning. And through it all, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Mrs. Whitmore found her, standing right over the body. Everyone knows she'd do anything to protect her daughter. You saw how Serena humiliated them tonight. Pushed her, probably. Held her under. Eliza stood in the hallway outside the guest room, listening to the speculation, and felt her world tilting sideways. She'd spent weeks fighting for her own reputation. Now she had to fight for her mother's life. Miss Whitmore? A hand touched her shoulder. She turned to find the Duke beside her, his expression carefully neutral, in public mode, giving nothing away. The magistrate is here, he said quietly. He'll want to speak with you, and your mother. She didn't do this. I know. Something in his eyes softened, but we need to prove it. The magistrate was a heavy-set man named Cornwall, with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness. He set up in Lord Pemberton's study and began interviewing witnesses one by one. Eliza's mother went first. She emerged 20 minutes later looking gray and shaken. He thinks I did it, she whispered to Eliza. He was polite about it, but I could tell. He thinks I tried to kill her. What did you tell him? The truth,
That I went outside for air, heard a splash, and found her in the fountain. That I was trying to help her when you and the Duke arrived. Her hands twisted together. But I have no proof. No one saw me leave the ballroom. No one can verify my story. Then we find someone who can verify it, Eliza said firmly. Someone must have seen something. Miss Whitmore. The magistrate's assistant appeared in the doorway. Mr. Cornwall would like to speak with you now. Eliza squeezed her mother's hand and walked into the study. Cornwall sat behind Lord Pemberton's massive desk, a notebook open in front of him. He gestured to a chair. Miss Whitmore, thank you for your patience. I understand this has been a difficult evening. That's an understatement, sir. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Indeed. Now, I'd like you to walk me through the events as you remember them, starting with your conversation with Lady Serena in the ballroom. Eliza took a breath and began. She told him everything. Serena's accusations, Hartley's confession, the aftermath, the moment on the terrace with the Duke, the scream, finding Serena in the water with her mother standing nearby. Cornwall took notes, his expression giving nothing away. When she finished, he sat back and studied her. Your mother claims she found Lady Serena already in the water. Do you believe her? Absolutely. Even though your mother had excellent reason to want Lady Serena silenced? My mother is not a murderer. Perhaps not intentionally. Cornwall's voice was gentle. But people do desperate things to protect their children. A moment of anger, a push, an accident that went too far. No. Eliza's hands clenched in her lap. If you're going to accuse her, do it directly. Don't hide behind implications. Cornwall's eyebrows rose. You have spine, Miss Whitmore. I'll give you that. I have the truth. My mother didn't hurt Serena. Then who did? Lady Serena says she was pushed. Someone wanted her in that fountain. If not your mother, then who? It was the question Eliza had been asking herself for the past hour. Who else had reason to want Serena dead, or at least badly frightened? I don't know, she admitted. But there were 300 people at that ball. Any one of them could have, yes, but would have? That's a much shorter list. Cornwall flipped through his notes. Lady Serena has made enemies, certainly, but most of them would be content to let social exile do its work. Murder, or attempted murder, requires a special kind of desperation. He looked up, meeting her eyes. The kind of desperation a mother might feel watching her daughter's reputation destroyed. Eliza's throat tightened. You've already decided she's guilty. I've decided nothing, but the evidence points in a very clear direction, Miss Whitmore. Unless something changes, I'll have no choice but to— A knock interrupted him. Lord Pemberton opened the door, looking agitated. Cornwall, you need to hear this. Lady Serena is awake, and she's talking. They rushed upstairs to find Serena propped up in bed, still pale but conscious. The physician hovered nearby, looking concerned. She shouldn't be exerting herself, he protested. She needs rest. I need to speak. Serena's voice was weak but determined. She looked at Cornwall. You're the magistrate? I am, my lady. Then you need to know the truth. She took a shaky breath. Mrs. Whitmore didn't push me. The room went silent. Cornwall leaned forward. You're certain? Yes. I saw who did it. Serena's eyes found Eliza in the crowd. It was my own cousin, Lady Charlotte Caldwell. Gasps rippled through the assembled witnesses. Charlotte Caldwell was Serena's second cousin, a mousy woman in her 30s who'd never married and lived on the family's charity. Lady Charlotte? Cornwall's skepticism was clear. Why would she— Because I ruined her life. Serena's laugh was bitter. 10 years ago, Charlotte was engaged to a baronet. Nothing spectacular, but respectable. She was happy. Then I decided I wanted him, so I seduced him at a house party and made sure Charlotte found us together. The engagement ended. He married me instead. Eliza's stomach turned. The marriage lasted 6 months before he died, Serena continued, thrown from a horse. I got his money and moved on. Charlotte got nothing but shame and a reputation as a woman who couldn't keep her man. She's been dependent on my family's goodwill ever since. And you think she pushed you tonight out of revenge? Cornwall asked. I know she did. I saw her face right before I went into the water. She said— Serena's voice cracked. She said it was finally my turn to know what drowning felt like. Cornwall looked at his assistant. Find Lady Charlotte. Bring her here. But the search proved unnecessary. Charlotte Caldwell was already gone. Her room at the Pemberton estate was empty, her belongings hastily packed. A servant reported seeing her leave through the garden gate approximately an hour ago, carrying a small bag. She's run, Cornwall said grimly, which is as good as a confession. He turned to Eliza's mother, who stood in the doorway looking like she might collapse from relief. Mrs. Whitmore, you're free to go. My apologies for the distress. Eliza's mother nodded mutely, tears streaming down her face. As for you, Lady Serena, Cornwall's voice hardened. I'll need a full statement, and we'll need to organize a search for Lady Charlotte. Of course. Serena sank back into the pillows, exhausted. Whatever you need. The crowd began to disperse, whispers following them out. The drama of the evening had just doubled. First the scandal in the ballroom, now attempted murder in the gardens. London would talk about this for years. Eliza started to follow her mother out, but a weak voice stopped her. Wait, please. She turned. Serena was looking at her, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, there was no anger or calculation in her expression, just exhaustion and something that might have been regret. Could I speak with you? Alone? Eliza glanced at the Duke, who nodded slightly. Then she crossed to the bed and sat in the chair the physician had vacated. What do you want, Serena? To apologize. The words came out barely above a whisper. For everything. The accusations, the letter, all of it. Eliza said nothing, just waited. I was angry, Serena continued, humiliated. I'd lost everything, the Duke, my reputation, my future. And it was easier to blame you than to accept that I'd done it to myself. She closed her eyes. Edmund and I, we convinced ourselves we could have it all. The money, the title, the freedom. We told ourselves Adrian would never know, never care, that it was a victimless arrangement. Except it wasn't. No, Serena's voice broke. It wasn't. And when you exposed us, I hated you for it, for being brave enough to speak the truth when I was too much of a coward to face it. So you tried to destroy me. Yes, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I understand what I did, that I'm sorry. Eliza studied the woman in the bed, still beautiful despite the ordeal, but somehow diminished, like a carefully constructed facade had finally cracked, revealing the frightened person underneath. What will you do now? Eliza asked quietly. Leave London. Probably leave England. My family won't forgive this scandal, and after what Charlotte did, she shuddered. I can't stay somewhere I've hurt so many people. That's probably wise. Serena's eyes opened, meeting Eliza's. For what it's worth. You were right about all of it. Adrian deserved better than what I was planning to give him. And you were braver in one moment than I've been in my entire life. She held out her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza took it. I hope you'll be happy, Serena whispered. Both of you. You deserve it. Then she closed her eyes again, effectively ending the conversation. Eliza stood and walked to the door where the Duke waited in the hallway. Everything all right? He asked quietly. I think so. She glanced back at the closed door. She apologized. Did you accept? I don't know yet. Eliza rubbed her temples, suddenly exhausted. Is it terrible that part of me still hates her, even after everything that just happened? It's human. He touched her elbow gently. Come on. Let's get you home. The ride back to the Whitmore residence was quiet. Eliza's mother dozed in the corner of the carriage, worn out from shock and relief. Eliza's father kept patting his wife's hand, looking like he'd aged 10 years in one night. And Eliza sat across from the Duke, acutely aware of every moment their eyes met in the darkness. Thank you, she said finally, for believing my mother, for not. I told you. I know the truth when I hear it. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Your mother was innocent. Anyone who looked past their own assumptions could see that. The magistrate didn't. The magistrate was doing his job, following evidence, he paused. Though I may have had a word with him before Serena woke up,
pointed out a few logical inconsistencies in the theory that your mother was guilty. Eliza's breath caught. You what? I simply observed that a woman who'd just publicly won a major social battle would have no reason to risk everything on violence. That if your mother had wanted to hurt Serena, she had far better opportunities before tonight. His mouth curved slightly. And that the fountain incident conveniently distracted from Serena's humiliation in the ballroom, which seemed suspicious. You made him suspect Serena was lying? That she staged it? I made him consider all possibilities, which led him to investigate more thoroughly, which led him to question Serena more directly, which led to the truth about Charlotte. He shrugged. Sometimes helping justice along requires a gentle push in the right direction. Eliza stared at him. This man who'd spent weeks defending her family, who just systematically dismantled a murder investigation to protect her mother, who sat across from her in the darkness like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why? She whispered. Why go to such lengths for people you barely know? His expression softened. I think you know why. Her heart stuttered. Adrian, we're here. The carriage rolled to a stop in front of the Whitmore townhouse. Come on, you need rest. He helped her mother down, spoke briefly with her father about security measures for the next few days, and prepared to leave. But as he climbed back into the carriage, he caught Eliza's hand. Tomorrow, he said quietly, come to my residence at 2:00. There's something I need to discuss with you. What is it? Tomorrow. He squeezed her fingers once and released them. Sleep well, Eliza. Then he was gone, the carriage disappearing into the night, leaving Eliza standing on her doorstep with 1,000 questions and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. The next day arrived with headlines that screamed the scandal across every newspaper in London. Duke's former fiancée nearly murdered Caldwell family in disgrace. Society belle flees country. But beneath the sensational headlines, something else was happening. A shift in the narrative. Stories began appearing that painted Eliza not as a schemer, but as a heroine. The woman who'd warned the Duke, who'd saved him from a disastrous marriage, who'd survived Serena's revenge with grace and courage. Lady Ashford published a retraction of her previous implications. Lord Moresby wrote a column praising Eliza's integrity. Even the Pembertons sent flowers with a note expressing their admiration. By noon, Eliza had received 7 invitations to upcoming events. By 1:00, her mother was crying happy tears over calling cards from families who'd cut them dead just days ago. You've done it, her mother kept saying. You've actually done it. They believe you. They respect you. But Eliza barely heard her. She was too focused on the clock, watching the minutes tick toward 2. At 1:45, she put on her best day dress and told her mother she was going for a walk. A walk? Now? But we have so many callers to prepare for. I'll be back soon, Mama. I promise. The walk to the Duke's Mayfair residence took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of rehearsing what she might say, what he might want to discuss, what any of this meant. The house was magnificent. 4 stories of pale stone with columns and perfectly manicured gardens. The butler who answered the door looked like he'd been carved from the same expensive marble. Miss Whitmore, His Grace is expecting you. This way, please. He led her through halls lined with portraits and priceless art, up a sweeping staircase to a private sitting room overlooking the gardens. The Duke stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. He turned when she entered. Eliza, thank you for coming. You said you needed to discuss something. I did. I do. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. She sat, her heart hammering. He remained standing, which made her nervous. This felt formal, rehearsed. I've been thinking, he began, about the past few weeks, about everything that's happened, the engagement, the scandal, the us. Us, she repeated faintly. Yes. He turned to face her fully. I ended my engagement to Serena because she was betraying me. But if I'm honest, I think part of me was relieved. Because that arrangement, it was business, strategy. Everything a marriage should be according to society, and nothing it should be according to... He stopped, took a breath. According to what I've learned from watching you. Eliza's breath caught. You risked everything for the truth, he continued. You stood up to people more powerful than you. You survived attacks that would have destroyed most people.
And through it all, you never compromised who you were. He moved closer. You're brave and honest and completely unsuitable by every measure society cares about. Thank you. His mouth quirked. That was meant as a compliment. What I'm trying to say, very badly apparently, is that I don't want suitable anymore. I don't want arrangements and strategy and marriages of convenience. He knelt in front of her chair. Eliza's heart stopped. I want real. I want honest. I want someone who will tell me the truth even when it's difficult. His eyes met hers. I want you. Adrian, her voice came out as barely a whisper. I know this is fast. I know we barely know each other. I know that by every reasonable measure, this is probably insane. He took her hand. But I also know that every time I look at you, I see someone I want to know better, someone I want to protect and support, and, if you'll let me, love. Tears stung her eyes. You can't possibly. Can't I? You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met, Eliza Whitmore, and I'd be the greatest fool in England if I let you walk away. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. A ring. Simple, elegant. A single diamond that caught the afternoon light and threw rainbows across the room. Marry me, he said quietly. Not because it makes strategic sense or because society expects it. Marry me because I'm falling in love with you, and I hope, you might be falling too. Eliza stared at him, this powerful man kneeling at her feet, offering her everything she'd never dared dream of having. I'm nobody, she whispered, the overlooked daughter of a minor nobleman. I have no fortune, no connections, nothing that makes sense for a duke. You have everything that matters. He squeezed her hand. You have courage and integrity and the ability to see past surfaces to truth. You have my respect, my admiration, and my heart. He paused. The question is, do I have yours? Did he? Eliza thought about the past weeks. The terror and the triumph. The moments when he'd defended her, believed her, stood beside her when everyone else walked away. The way her pulse jumped every time he entered a room. The way his smile made her forget to be nervous. The way looking at him now felt like coming home to a place she'd been searching for her entire life. Yes, she breathed. Yes, you have my heart. You've had it since the moment you listened to the truth, when you had every reason to dismiss it. His smile transformed his face. Is that a yes to the proposal as well? It's a yes to everything. She laughed through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I love you. Yes to all of it. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, and then he was pulling her into his arms, kissing her like she was air and he'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. London is going to have a field day with this, he murmured. Let them talk. She smiled. We've survived worse. We have, haven't we? He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. The overlooked woman and the disappointed duke. Not exactly a fairy tale. Better. She touched his face gently. It's real. And in the afternoon light of his private sitting room, with the ring heavy on her finger and his arms around her, Eliza Whitmore realized that sometimes the truth didn't just set you free. Sometimes it brought you home. The announcement appeared in every major newspaper the following morning. His Grace the Duke of Blackthorn is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Eliza Whitmore, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Whitmore of London. The wedding will take place in 6 weeks at St. Mary's Church. Eliza read it 3 times over breakfast, still half convinced she'd wake up and discover the past 24 hours had been an elaborate dream. But the ring on her finger was real. The way her mother kept bursting into tears of joy was real. And the stack of congratulatory notes already arriving before noon was definitely bewilderingly real. 6 weeks, her mother kept repeating. 6 weeks to plan a ducal wedding. Eliza will need a new wardrobe, a proper trousseau. There's the guest list to consider, the flowers, the... Mama. Eliza caught her mother's fluttering hands. Breathe. Breathe. How can I breathe? My daughter is marrying a duke. She pressed her hands to her cheeks. A duke, Eliza. Do you understand what this means? It means I'm marrying a man I love. It means everything. Her mother's voice cracked.
After weeks of scandal and whispers and social exile, you've done it. You've risen above all of them. But Eliza wasn't thinking about rising above anyone. She was thinking about Adrian's smile when she'd said yes, about the way his hand had trembled slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger, about the impossible fact that the man she'd risked everything to warn had become the man she couldn't imagine living without. A knock interrupted her thoughts. The butler appeared, looking flustered. "Miss Whitmore, there's a situation at the front door." "What kind of situation?" "Approximately 30 callers, miss, all requesting audience. There's also a reporter from the Times asking for an interview, and Lady Pemberton sent her carriage with an invitation to tea this afternoon. 30 callers." Her mother shot to her feet. "Already? But we're not prepared. The drawing room isn't—" "Eliza, you need to change into something more appropriate." "Actually," Eliza said slowly, "I think I need to visit the Duke." She found Adrian in his study, surrounded by correspondence. He looked up when she entered, and his expression transformed from businesslike concentration to something warm and unguarded. "Eliza, perfect timing." He stood, crossing to kiss her hand with a formality that made her smile. "I was just drafting a response to the Archbishop about the wedding ceremony. Apparently marrying the woman who saved you from social catastrophe requires extensive ecclesiastical coordination." "Is that what I did? Saved you from catastrophe?" "Among other things." He pulled her close, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. "How are you holding up? I imagine your house is chaos." 30 callers before noon. My mother's having heart palpitations, and I think there's a reporter camped outside our door." She pulled back to look at him. "Is it always going to be like this?" "Probably worse for a while. London loves a dramatic redemption story." His thumb traced circles on her back. "But eventually they'll find something new to obsess over, a scandal, a war, another engagement. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we do what we've been doing, hold our heads high, tell the truth, and refuse to let other people's opinions dictate our happiness." A throat cleared behind them. Adrian's secretary stood in the doorway, looking apologetic. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but Lord Ashford is here. He says it's urgent." Adrian's expression cooled several degrees. "Show him in." Lord Ashford entered looking uncomfortable, his hat clutched in his hands like a shield. He nodded to Eliza, then turned to Adrian. "Your Grace, thank you for seeing me. I know after recent events you have every reason to refuse, but He stopped, gathering courage. "I came to apologize." The silence that followed could have shattered glass. "Apologize," Adrian repeated flatly. "Yes, for my wife's behavior. For the rumors she spread about Miss Whitmore, for our failure to see the truth when it was presented to us." Ashford's face reddened. "We were wrong, completely, inexcusably wrong, and I wanted to say that personally before your wedding makes it impossible to speak privately." Adrian studied him for a long moment. "Your wife tried to destroy an innocent woman's reputation to protect Serena Caldwell's lies." "I know. She spread vicious gossip, turned society against Miss Whitmore, made her life hell for weeks." "I know," Ashford said miserably. "And if I could undo it, I would. But I can't. All I can do is apologize and assure you that my wife deeply regrets her actions." "Does she?" Eliza spoke up quietly. "Or does she regret being on the wrong side of a scandal?" Ashford turned to her, and she saw genuine shame in his eyes. "Honestly, probably both. My wife is ambitious, status-conscious. She backed Serena because Serena was powerful and beautiful and seemed untouchable." He paused. "But when she realized she'd aligned herself with a liar and nearly destroyed an innocent woman in the process, it shook her. Badly. Not badly enough to apologize herself, apparently," Adrian observed. "She's afraid you won't receive her, that you'll refuse to see her socially, that the scandal will—" Ashford stopped. "She sent me to test the waters, to see if there's any possibility of forgiveness." "Why should we forgive her?" Eliza asked. The question wasn't angry, just genuinely curious. Ashford met her eyes. "Because she's learned something from this. That truth matters more than appearances. That integrity outweighs status. That people like you and the Duke, people with actual principles,
are worth more than 100 Serenas. He turned back to Adrian. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. Just, perhaps, to allow her the chance to prove she's learned from it. Adrian glanced at Eliza. She gave a small nod. Tell your wife, Adrian said carefully, that she may call on us next week, after the wedding. If her apology is genuine, if she's willing to make public amends for the damage she caused, we'll consider resuming cordial relations. Relief flooded Ashford's face. Thank you, Your Grace, truly. And Miss Whitmore, he turned to Eliza. Congratulations. The Duke is a fortunate man. After he left, Eliza sank into a chair. That was unexpected. Was it? Adrian poured 2 glasses of brandy despite the early hour. You've just accomplished something most people spend lifetimes trying to achieve. You've made London's elite respect you without compromising who you are. I didn't do it alone. No. He handed her a glass. But you started it. The night you told me the truth in the gardens. Everything that followed, the scandal, the vindication, the transformation, it all began because you had the courage to speak when staying silent would have been easier. And now I'm marrying a duke and receiving apologies from people who tried to destroy me. She took a sip, the brandy burning pleasantly. It feels surreal. Welcome to the aristocracy. His smile was wry, where today's enemy becomes tomorrow's ally the moment the power shifts. Is that what this is? Power shifting? Partly, but it's also people recognizing quality when they see it. You proved yourself in the harshest possible circumstances. That's not something they'll forget. A new thought occurred to her. What about Serena? Have you heard anything? She left for France 2 days ago, quietly. Her family provided funds on the condition she stay out of England for at least 5 years. His expression was neutral. Charlotte was caught trying to board a ship to America. She'll face trial for attempted murder. And Edmund Hartley sailed for Boston last week. Apparently he's planning to start over somewhere. His reputation hasn't preceded him. Adrian set down his glass. They're all gone, Eliza. The immediate threats, the active enemies. Handled. What's left is just the normal chaos of London society. Normal chaos, she repeated. Is that supposed to be reassuring? Compared to the past 6 weeks? Absolutely. The next few weeks were a whirlwind that made the previous scandal seem almost peaceful by comparison. Wedding preparations consumed every waking moment. Dress fittings, menu selections, guest lists that expanded exponentially as families who'd cut them dead suddenly remembered their deep affection for the Whitmores. Eliza's mother threw herself into the planning with manic energy, determined that her daughter's wedding would be absolutely perfect. Her father negotiated business contracts that materialized seemingly overnight as people scrambled to align themselves with the soon-to-be Duchess of Blackthorn. And through it all, Adrian remained a steady presence. He attended fittings when he could, offered opinions on flowers with surprising knowledge, and deflected the worst of society's attention with the kind of aristocratic authority that made people think twice before asking invasive questions. But the real test came 3 weeks before the wedding at a dinner party hosted by the Marchioness of Wessex. The Marchioness was one of London's most influential hostesses, known for her exclusive guest lists and savage wit. An invitation to her table was a mark of social arrival. A snub was social death. Eliza had never been invited before. Neither had her parents. But the cream-colored card that arrived one morning changed that. The Marchioness of Wessex requests the honor of your presence at dinner, in celebration of the upcoming nuptials of His Grace, the Duke of Blackthorn and Miss Eliza Whitmore. She's acknowledging you, Eliza's mother breathed, publicly celebrating your marriage. Eliza, do you understand what this means? That we need to find something appropriate to wear? It means you've won. Her mother's eyes shone. Completely, unquestionably. The Marchioness doesn't back losers. If she's hosting a dinner in your honor, it means London society has officially accepted you. The night of the dinner, Eliza dressed in a gown of deep sapphire silk that Adrian had commissioned specially for the occasion. Her mother wept, happy tears this time, and her father looked at her like he was seeing a stranger. You look like a duchess already, he said gruffly. I look like myself in an expensive dress, she corrected, but she smiled. Adrian arrived to escort them personally, resplendent in black evening wear. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes that made her breath catch. Beautiful, he murmured, kissing her hand. Absolutely perfect. The Marchioness's residence was a palace in miniature, 3 stories of cream stone with gardens that rivaled the royal parks. Footmen in livery lined the entrance, crystal chandeliers blazed through every window. And when they entered the drawing room, conversation stopped. Every important family in London was represented. The Ashfords looking nervous, the Pembertons beaming as if they'd personally orchestrated the romance, Lord Moresby already working the room for gossip. Even families Eliza had only read about in society columns, the Cavendishes, the Granthams, the Fitzwilliams, all of them turning to stare at the woman who'd gone from social pariah to Duchess-in-waiting in less than 2 months. The Marchioness herself swept forward, a tiny woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Your Grace, how delightful." She greeted Adrian with the easy familiarity of old friends. Then she turned to Eliza, and her expression sharpened. "And this must be the famous Miss Whitmore, the woman who brought London to its knees with nothing but honesty and spine." "Your ladyship," Eliza curtsied, heart pounding. "You're too kind." "I'm never too kind. I'm accurate." The Marchioness studied her like a jeweler examining a stone. "You've caused quite the stir, my dear. Scandals, revelations, a near murder at the Pemberton ball. London hasn't been this entertained in decades." "I didn't mean to entertain anyone." "No, you meant to tell the truth, even more refreshing." She linked her arm through Eliza's, effectively claiming her. "Come, let me introduce you to people who actually matter, not these social climbing parasites who wouldn't have given you the time of day 2 months ago." She steered Eliza through the crowd, making introductions with the kind of authority that brooked no resistance. Within minutes, Eliza found herself in conversation with a duchess, 2 countesses, and a baroness who ran half of London's charitable organizations. "We need women like you," the baroness said bluntly. "Women who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo. Would you be interested in joining our education initiative? We're trying to establish schools for working-class girls." Eliza blinked. Yes, I'd be honored." "Excellent. We meet Thursdays. I'll send the details." The baroness moved on, already recruiting her next target. The duchess leaned closer to Eliza. "Don't look so shocked, dear. You've just become one of the most powerful women in England. People will want your support, your endorsement, your name on their causes." "But I haven't done anything. You told the truth when lying would have been safer. You survived a coordinated campaign to destroy you, and you won the heart of one of England's most eligible bachelors in the process." The Duchess smiled. "That's not nothing. That's a story people will tell for generations." Dinner was announced, and they filed into a dining room that could have hosted a royal banquet. Eliza found herself seated between Adrian and Lord Cavendish, one of the wealthiest men in England. "Miss Whitmore," Cavendish turned to her with interest. "I understand your father is in trade. Textiles?" "Import and export, yes." "Fascinating. I've been looking to diversify my investments. Perhaps we could discuss potential partnerships after your wedding." She glanced at Adrian, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. "I'd be happy to arrange a meeting," she said carefully. And just like that, her father's struggling business became a topic of interest for one of England's financial titans. The dinner progressed through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Conversation flowed around Eliza like a river: politics, business, society gossip. She contributed when she could, listened carefully when she couldn't, and tried not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer unreality of it all. Then, between the 4th and 5th courses, the Marchioness stood and tapped her crystal glass. "My friends, your attention, please." Her voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "We're gathered tonight to celebrate an upcoming marriage. But more than that, we're gathered to acknowledge something rather extraordinary." Eliza's stomach dropped. Adrian's hand found hers under the table, squeezing reassurance. 6 weeks ago, the Marchioness continued, London society was preparing to witness what we all thought would be the wedding of the season. The Duke of Blackthorn and Lady Serena Caldwell. A perfect match by every traditional measure. Uncomfortable silence rippled through the room. But then something unexpected happened. A woman no one had noticed before, a woman most of us had never even heard of, did something remarkable. The Marchioness looked directly at Eliza. She told the truth. Every eye turned to Eliza. She felt her face flush but held the Marchioness's gaze. She risked her reputation, her family's standing, her entire future to warn the Duke about a betrayal he couldn't see. And when the woman she'd exposed tried to destroy her in retaliation, she didn't back down. She didn't apologize. She stood firm and let the truth defend itself. The Marchioness raised her glass. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the kind of integrity our society desperately needs. So I propose a toast to Miss Eliza Whitmore, soon to be the Duchess of Blackthorn. May she bring that same honesty and courage to her new position, and may we all be brave enough to follow her example. To Miss Whitmore, the room chorused. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. Thank you, she managed. Your ladyship. Everyone. I never expected— No, you didn't, the Marchioness interrupted gently. That's precisely why you deserve it. Now sit down before you start crying and ruin your beautiful dress. Laughter rippled through the room, warm and genuine. And as Eliza sat, she realized something profound had just happened. She hadn't just been accepted into London society. She'd been embraced, celebrated, held up as an example. The overlooked woman had become unforgettable. After dinner, guests filtered into the drawing room for cards and conversation. Adrian pulled Eliza onto a small balcony overlooking the gardens. You all right? He asked quietly. I don't know. She pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. That toast, what the Marchioness said, was true. Every word. But I'm just— She struggled for words. I'm just me. I told the truth because it was the right thing to do. I didn't do it to become some kind of symbol. I know. That's what makes it matter. He turned her to face him. You acted with integrity when it cost you everything. That's rare, Eliza, especially here, and people recognize it. What if I can't live up to it? What if I disappoint them? Then you'll handle it the same way you've handled everything else, with honesty and courage. He touched her face gently. You're going to be an extraordinary duchess, not because of your title or your connection to me, because of who you are. She leaned into his touch, letting his certainty steady her. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her forehead. Now come on. Lord Cavendish wants to discuss business, and I think the Baroness is plotting to recruit you for at least 3 more charitable causes. Is this what the rest of my life looks like? Dinners and causes and everyone wanting something? Probably. He smiled. But you'll also have me, and a voice that matters, and the power to actually change things. He paused. Remember what you told me that night in the gardens? That you hated watching people walk into traps you could have warned them about? Yes. You'll never have to watch silently again. As a duchess, you'll have the platform to speak, to warn, to help. His eyes were serious. You can do more good in 1 year than most people accomplish in lifetimes, if you choose to. The weight of it settled over her, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Then I choose to, she said firmly. The wedding took place on a perfect September morning with sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Church. Every pew was packed with London's elite, all of them craning their necks for a glimpse of the bride. Eliza stood in the vestibule with her father, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped her bouquet. Nervous? Her father asked. Terrified. Good. Means you're paying attention. He patted her hand. You ready for this? She looked through the doorway into the church. Hundreds of faces. The Archbishop in his ceremonial robes. And at the altar, Adrian, watching the entrance with an expression that made her forget to breathe. Yes, she whispered. I'm ready. The processional music began. Her father offered his arm, and together they walked down the aisle toward the man who'd believed her when no one else would. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and prayers, and the ring sliding onto her finger, a match to the engagement ring, both of them catching the light. She heard herself speak the words that bound her to him, heard his voice steady and sure as he promised his life to hers. And then the Archbishop was pronouncing them married, and Adrian was kissing her in front of everyone who'd ever doubted them, and the church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, duke and duchess, while bells rang overhead and flowers rained down from the gallery. Outside, the crowd waiting in the street was enormous. Hundreds of people, most of them strangers, all of them cheering. Someone threw rice, someone else released doves, and through it all, Adrian kept his arm around her waist, anchoring her. "Smile," he murmured. "They want to see their fairy tale." "This isn't a fairy tale." "No." He looked down at her, and his smile was real. "It's better. It's true." The reception at Adrian's estate was a spectacle that would be discussed for years. 500 guests, tables laden with food from every corner of the empire. Musicians, dancers, enough champagne to float a ship. But the moment Eliza would remember forever came late in the evening, when most of the guests had departed and the remaining few clustered in small groups, talking and laughing. She stood on the terrace looking out over the gardens, these same gardens where she'd once hidden in the shadows, terrified and invisible. Now they were hers. This house was hers. The title was hers. But more than that, the man standing beside her was hers. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked quietly. "That 6 weeks ago I was nobody, and now I'm a duchess." "You were never nobody." His arm circled her waist. "You were just waiting for the right moment to prove it." She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "What happens now?" "Now?" He considered. "We finish the reception, thank the remaining guests, and then I take my wife upstairs and begin the rest of our lives together." "The rest of our lives," she repeated. "That's a long time." "Not nearly long enough." He turned her to face him. "I want to give you everything, Eliza. Not just the title and the houses and the wealth. I want to give you a voice that's heard, power that's respected, the ability to change the things you care about. I just want you. You have me. Always." He kissed her forehead. "But you also have so much more potential than you realize, and I intend to spend the rest of our lives watching you discover it." Music drifted from the ballroom. He held out his hand. "Dance with me, our first dance as husband and wife." She took his hand and let him lead her back inside, where the remaining guests parted to make room. The musicians struck up a waltz, and suddenly they were spinning across the floor, perfectly matched, perfectly together. Around them, London's elite watched and whispered, some with admiration, some with envy, some still trying to understand how the overlooked woman had become the most talked-about duchess in England. But Eliza didn't care what they thought anymore. She'd learned that the truth had power, that courage mattered more than status, that speaking up when everyone else stayed silent could change everything. And most importantly, that sometimes the person nobody saw coming was exactly the person everyone needed. Years later, the Blackthorn estate would be known for many things. The Duke's business acumen, the Duchess's charitable works. Their children raised to value integrity over appearance. But the story people told most often was the one about how they'd met, about a woman who risked everything to tell the truth, about a man who listened when everyone else dismissed her, about how the quietest voice in the room became the one that changed everything. Because Eliza Whitmore, now the Duchess of Blackthorn, had learned something that night in the gardens all those weeks ago. The most dangerous woman in any room wasn't the most beautiful or the most powerful. It was the one nobody saw coming, the one brave enough to whisper the truth when silence would have been safer. And that woman, overlooked and underestimated and utterly unstoppable, had just begun to show London what she could do.